Japan has Godzilla, and the US has King Kong, so what about the rest of the world? Well, for Britain, their answer to that question is Gorgo, and the giant behemoth, but this isn't about him. Picture this. It's the 1950s, and in between sock hops, listening to Elvis, and accusing your neighbors of being communists, you could take yourself down to the drive-in theater and watch a monster movie. You've got the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Godzilla, It Came From Beneath the Sea, Rodan, the Giant Claw, and them, just to name a few. The 60s were all set to continue the trend. The King brothers were looking to get a piece of that pie after the success of Toho's Godzilla, and had Eugene Leray direct and help write the story. He also did some of the initial sketches of the creature, including the iconic ear fin, as he was also an artist and designer. The original story wasn't quite what we got in the end, though. Gorgo was initially titled Kuru Island, and took place on a Pacific island in Tokyo, Japan, as opposed to the Irish Nara Island and London that ended up happening. It also didn't originally have any military shooting at it. The original idea was scrapped when the co-production deal in Japan fell through, however. Instead, the whole thing went to ye olde England, though France had also been pitched. The Gorgo suit, as previously mentioned, was based on Leray's designs and created by the effects studio at MGM. His eyes, ears, and tail were all activated with different hydraulic systems from within the suit, which was 8 feet tall. There are also some concept paintings by Edgar Quichlet in one of his last jobs. They show a monster tearing apart London in ways that would take some truly impressive special effects to put on screen. In the end, the film cost $650,000 to make, the same as King Kong, and the most expensive King Brothers production picture. With that out of the way, here's what happens in the movie Gorgo from 1961. Notice how I said the movie. This video is not just about the movie. There's a lot of tie-in material and legacy, so just stay tuned. Englishmen Sam Slade and Joe Ryan are diving off of a ship, which is a whopping total of 4 first names between 2 people, looking for sunken treasure even as the waters around them start acting peculiar. The ship starts rocking from the storm as they take on a lot of water. Once they make it through, they send a small boat ahead to ask if they can dock on Nara Island, spotting strange fish on their way over. A young boy named Sean leads them to the home of the harbor master, who is currently out, named McCartan. Sam and Joe are shown McCartan's own cache of uncovered treasures, including a statue of Ogra, the sea spirit. I'm sure that's not foreshadowing anything. McCartan arrives home and claims his treasure is only valuable to science and that Joe and Sam need to leave within 24 hours. Sam and Joe discover a diver from the island has gone missing and locate his body, discovering he died of fright with a few doubloons in his hand, a sure sign of treasure to be found. When Sam and Joe go diving for said treasure, they get a quick glimpse of a monster in the deep that spooks them both. Sean gets Sam and Joe for a meeting with McCartan, who just tells them to get off the island. Some villagers who were looking for another missing diver have their boats attacked by a large monster. Shooting the monster does nothing as it makes its way to the island. A volley of burning wood is thrown at the creature, which finally causes it to retreat. The next day, after a swarm of angry villagers is formed outside of McCartan's house, Sam and Joe say they can get rid of the monster in exchange for some of the treasure McCartan has stored. Sean warns Joe and Sam that trying to take out the monster is a bad thing, but the two men brush it off, even pondering how much the monster would be worth kept alive. Joe goes under the water, getting slowly tugged under the waves until he spots the monster, which grabs his vessel, at which point the ship is able to lower its nets and reel back in the creature. The second the monster is brought on the deck, it's the top news story anywhere. Some professors from the University of Dublin hope to procure the creature. However, Joe and Sam are much more interested in getting the creature to Dorking Circus in London, where they can make bank off the creature they've captured. To be fair, Jurassic Park wouldn't be out for 30 years to show them that dinosaur exhibits can go terribly awry. Sean has stowed away on the ship and attempts to free the monster. Upon finding him, Sam and Joe put Sean to bed, and during that, the guard they put to watch over the monster was slain. Once at the circus, the professors confront Sam and Joe about the creature's potential danger to society. However, nobody is willing to let the creature go and forfeit their profit. Now dubbed Gorgo, the monster is tranquilized as it is moved into its new enclosure, before the flash of a camera causing Gorgo to awaken. The men use flamethrowers to lead Gorgo into his pen. Gorgo adverts are plastered all about, and the crowds are eager to see the monster from a different time. Gorgo is quite unhappy with his new cage, not that anyone cares, except perhaps for Sam, who is beginning to have doubts about just how many more people he is willing to let be hurt by the animal when he gets a call from the professors. Upon arriving, the professors tell Joe and Sam that Gorgo seems to be an infant of his species, and that his parent would be much, much bigger. A fact which McCartan will soon realize on the island as he watches Gorgo's mother, the sea spirit Ogra, begin her trail of destruction. The British Navy goes to investigate the lack of contact from Nara Island and spot Gorgo's mother making her way through the waters and towards London. Sam drunkenly tries to free Gorgo as the British Navy goes after its mother. However, their weapons are no use against the enormous creature, nor is dumping a bunch of oil in the water in an attempt to light her ablaze, though I'm sure a few sea turtles will feel the impact. As Ogra is making her way downtown, Londoners go underground as it becomes occupied almost entirely by the army, one very big monster, and one smaller but still pretty big monster. Ogra makes London Bridge fall down and smashes Big Ben to little bits, as buildings collapse in her presence. Sam even has to save Sean from her path of destruction, her footsteps causing the underground to rumble. Fighter jets have no effect, and all of the electricity in London is diverted to Gorgo's enclosure to try and zap Ogra, which of course didn't really help. The only reason they don't drop a nuke on the creature is because of how populated the city is. However, Ogra was only ever really after one thing, and collects her son from his enclosure. The two are able to return to the sea, free from the real monster, man. Eugene Laurie, director and story creator, though not writer, didn't kill the monster at the end because his daughter Anita was upset that the monster died at the end of Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. She thought the fact that it died at the end was unfair, and she's so valid for that. Now, if you'll take a look at this movie poster here, something interesting is that the tagline is like nothing you've ever seen before, which is an interesting claim because it is so very much like movies we've seen before. Gorgo shares the man clearly inside of a dinosaur suit appearance of Godzilla, along with the fact that they both emerged from the ocean, combined with King Kong's capture of the monster and ship it to a major city that then creates unprecedented destruction in said city. The second thing you'll notice about the movie is that every single character is a white man. The only minority here are Celtics, the brown people of white people. Now, I know it came out in 1961, but Godzilla and King Kong both have women in them at least. Not that that fact makes the racism any better, or the sexism. It's almost like the inclusion of people on screen isn't always positive, the exclusion of a group is always negative. Gorgo has a knockoff of its own, Gappa, the Triphibian monster from 1967, in which a monster egg is taken from a Pacific island where a young boy warns them against doing so, and back to Tokyo, Japan, much like the original story for Gorgo, where the young monster's parents have to come pick up their child from the zoo, while, causing destruction throughout Japan. It also features Coca-Cola product placement and Gappa's theme song, and a female main character, which does not mean this film is getting any gold stars. The main female character settles down with a man, and the little boy character is in blackface, as are the rest of the Islanders. Another film based on Gorgo that the world will never see was an 8mm fan film entitled Gorgo vs. Godzilla, using clay figures which were manipulated live by a 13-year-old boy named John Carpenter, the director decades away from movies that would redefine the horror genre, honing his craft by making a fan film about Gorgo of all things. The film also appears as the headliner for Famous Monsters of Filmland 50th Anniversary, which features a painting of Gorgo by Basil Gagos, whose covers for the magazine are truly awe-inspiring. He also painted for Warren Publishing and did various album covers. Those aren't quite Gorgo related though, so it's with a heavy heart that I introduce you to the novelization. Now, I like reading, but I also like my books to come with pictures, so this was the first book I've read in a while, and it absolutely blows. You would think that the book would be just a straightforward novelization of the movie, but instead it's the most sexist fiction I've ever read. The biggest change in the novelization, which came out in 1960, a year before the movie's release, is the inclusion of the character of Moira. She's the daughter of McCartan, the harbor master from Nara Island, as well as the sister of Sean, who is no longer an orphan boy. Sam Slade didn't believe in Gorgo until he saw the monster's hideous scaly face, its slimy green talons, and the massive mouth that could swallow a killer whale. Sam didn't believe in love either until he met virginal Moira McCartan and helped her discover the deep passion slumbering within her. Now, my first impression upon reading this was that this was going to be a steamy kaiju story. However, given that this came out in 1960, the amount of sexy the general public was comfy with was far more restrained. So is there sex? Yes. Is it particularly sexy? No. Because there are few things less sexy than hating women. And let me tell you, this book hates women. Example number 1. This broad with the wonderful body and the flaming red hair seemed to think she could buy a ride to the moon with a lift of her eyebrow and a rise of the breasts. Probably sent it a short pleasure cruise to Galway Bay. The hell with that. I'd been suckered by enough dames in the past to know every angle of that game. Sorry, honey, I said. No sail, like we say in the States. The girl's cheeks flushed, and her eyes burned. Her breasts rose and fell angrily. She was Irish, and she was quick-tempered. And now, she was mad. I'd really riled her. That's me, old Sam, smooth with the dames. Take note that, in the description of Moira being angry, we've mentioned her breasts more than once. Example number 2. Slut, he yelled at her. jostling her roughly. "Lousy little slut, just like your mother. Can't keep the smell of a man out of your nose. Get back to the house." That one comes to us from McCartan, Moira's father. Example number 3. But it wasn't his fault, it was Moira's. She showed her hand, and I knew it was no good between us and had never been any good from the start. She was just a woman, like all the rest of them, with the same tricks and the same lies. Example 4, which is the last example I'll share, but certainly not the end of examples available in the book. "I kissed her again. You're in my blood, Moira, even though you're as untrustworthy as all women." Now, I'm all for a flawed main character, but Sam does not learn any lesson about how women aren't some other species. Except for Ogra, she is literally a different species. It also clearly isn't just about Moira, as the other women in the book are also cheaters who cannot be trusted, such as Anita, Sam's ex-girlfriend, and separately McCartan's ex-wife. I can't help but feel like the author, Bruce Cassidy, under the pseudonym Carson Bingham, was cheated on like seconds before he started plotting the book. On a funner note though, in the book, Gorgo fights an elephant, which actually isn't that fun now that I think about it. Aw man, stupid books without pictures. Grow up. It's time for a real book to step up. Surely this one isn't problematic. Uh-oh. The first time I heard about Gorgo, it was the comics. Charlton Comics was a publisher from the 40s to the 80s. In addition to their original horror and superhero titles, they published numerous licensed titles for shows and movies. Of course, this included Gorgo. The first artist of the series is part of what drew me to it. Steve Ditko is a prolific comic artist, whose most notable work was the co-creation of Marvel's web-slinger Spider-Man, among plenty of others for both DC and Marvel. Though the fact that Gorgo comics only started coming out a year before Spider-Man's debut is kinda neat. Not that the other artists in this book are anything to sneeze at. After all, you've got Dick Giordano here as well, who would go on to be the managing editor at DC, as well as Joe Sinnott, who would end up doing a lot of inks at Marvel on some of their most iconic series. Now, the funny thing about comics is that, for the most part, a new one needs to come out every month. So you might be wondering how the story gets split up across the 23 issues this ran for. The entirety of the movie's plot is used up in the first issue, and everything after that is just made up. I mean, everything is made up, but you know what I mean. Frankly, after watching the movie and reading the book, I was happy to flip through the plot in just one issue. By issue 2, Gorgo and his mom are swimming across the ocean and on their way to New York City, because this is an American comic, gosh darn it, and American comics are set in New York. Speaking of American, there's a whole thing in the movie where they don't want to use a hydrogen bomb on the monsters because of all the people in the area. Yeah, Washington immediately gives the okay to bomb Queens. By the end though, Gorgo and his mom get to head back into the ocean to rest. The two monsters are actually adorable. Gorgo is characterized as a very large puppy, who ends up causing mischief, but not intentionally, and is pretty cute while doing so. His mom is a bit more grumpy and only interacts with humans when she has to go pick up her son, which is also pretty cute. It's now issue 3. We've been to England. We've been to the US. Next up, we are going to communist Latin American country led by Fidel Castro. Sorry, I meant to say Mandel Astro. This is Gorgo's first brush up against communists, but it will certainly not be his last. He'll go on to fight communists from the Soviet Union, China, space, and Atlantis. This is the 60s after all. In addition to communists, Gorgo will spend his time fighting other giant monsters, such as Venusians, plant monsters, and dinosaurs. Now, unfortunately, I would be remiss to not mention how racist these comics are. Every Chinese person is an evil communist, and every black person is from an unspecified African tribe, and they all speak in broken English. This wasn't anything out of the ordinary for American comics of the time, but that obviously doesn't make it okay. In 1998, Mystery Science Theater 3000 put out an episode all about Gorgo. For those unfamiliar, Mystery Science Theater was a TV program that was basically a reaction video before those were a thing. The characters sit in front of the screen while making comments throughout the movie. Some interesting things this included were the homemade Gorgo suit they used on set, a joke about William Sylvester Trivial Pursuit, because who doesn't love a joke about Trivial Pursuit? And the best joke in this was definitely about making a calendar with all the women in the film, which are just these two for 2 seconds, and technically Ogra. In 2009, there was an unofficial short film sequel titled Waiting for Gorgo. A young woman working for the British Ministry of Defense has to perform an audit of the DMOA, Department of Monsters and Oversized Animals, where these two old guys have been preparing for Gorgo's return since the 60s, though evidently Gorgo never did return, so their department has just been forgotten to time. It's fun enough, but the joke goes on for a little too long. In 2013, we got a short documentary called Ninth Wonder of the World, Making of Gorgo. It's titled as such because King Kong is referred to as the 8th wonder of the world, so Gorgo gets pushed to 9th. It's just a simple documentary, but I enjoyed it. Also in 2013, Gorgo was used in Agnes King's run for a Maine Senate ad, which she ended up winning, which I'm sure was solely because of Gorgo. Even last year, 2025, there was new Gorgo content for the masses to consume. Titanic Creations released a prequel comic taking place in the 50s. They also released action figures based on the book, which were a little out of my budget. I think the craziest thing about making this video is that Gorgo isn't really special. It's just another monster movie, and yet the lasting impact it has had on its fans is truly baffling. I thought it was mediocre, to be honest, but the fact that someone like John Carpenter was a fan shows how far this film has reached into the hearts of those who have seen it. Gorgo may not be the king of the monsters, but he has some kind of cute monster charm that just can't be denied, even if his mom has to come pick him up. It's me, Gorgo. Definitely not that tool cat that did the rest of the voiceover. A like or subscribe would be much appreciated. Perhaps even a comment if you want. I've got a comment. Shouldn't Gorgo have an Irish accent? Heh heh.